Hi there, I'm Michelle the Painter from Berkshire Paint and Sip, and this is Paint and Sip at Home. Alright, so today we're going to be painting Luna Moth and Ladybells, and I'm going to be sipping on some Chardonnay. And if you enjoy this process, I do hope that you like and subscribe to my channel, and that you also check out my Patreon page where you're going to find additional painting perks. So let's get painting and let's get sipping. Alright, so for my materials today, I'm going to be using a stretched and primed 16 by 20 inch canvas. If you're painting along, you can certainly switch up the size, but that's what I'll be using. I'm going to be using acrylic paint today. My colors are titanium white, green oxide, Mars black, burnt umber, which I'll call brown, chrome yellow, magenta, and violet purple. And of course you can switch up those colors if you'd like, but that's what I'll be using. For my tools today, I have a white piece of chalk for doing an outline of our moth. And then I have 3 brushes. I have a 1/2 inch wide flat bristle brush. I have a number 8 round brush, round synthetic brush, and I have a number 4 round synthetic brush. And I will refer to these as small, medium, and large as we go through the painting process. Of course, you can switch those up as well if you'd like to. And if you're painting along with me, you'll probably want a cup of water for washing your brushes, as well as a paper towel for drying your brushes. And down below this video, in the video description, I do have a couple of additional resources for you that can help you through your painting process. One of them is a link where you can purchase the same exact paint kit that I'm using, from the large canvas to the same paints and all that good stuff. So that's down there for you. There's also a link where you can download a free image of the final painting. So you can print that and use it as visual reference as you go through the painting process. And there's also written step-by-step instructions down there for you as well. And that's all we're going to need today. Alright, so what we're going to do for the first step is we're doing our background. I'm going to be using my large brush. The colors I'm using are brown, green, magenta, yellow, and white. And how I'm going to do this, I'm going to do a very loose, kind of out of focus, almost an abstract type background. I'm going to have it darker at the bottom and lighter at the top. And the reason I'm using these colors is I'm attempting to make it kind of look like it's an out of focus type neutral, natural background, but it is really just kind of a abstract background. So you don't have to worry about making it look like anything, you know, specific. I'm going to start at the bottom, and I'm actually going to work my way up, so that way the colors that I'm using on my brush down at the bottom kind of work their way into those lighter tones up at the top, so it turns kind of more pastel-y for me. So I'm going to start with brown, green, and white on my brush all at the same time. I have a good amount of paint on my brush that I'm using, and I'm going to be using a left to right kind of crisscross type brush stroke. And every time I go to pick up paint, I'm going to just pick up a different combination. So this time I just picked up brown, and I'm just kind of using my left to right brush stroke to get my paint on here. I'm using a good amount of paint. I just picked up white and pink, or the magenta color, as I went over to this right hand side. I'm trying not to over blend it, but I definitely want there to be some talking of sorts between my sections of color. So you might find that this left to right crisscross type brush stroke may not work out so well for you, so you opt to do a circular type brush stroke. It's really what's going to be the most comfortable for you. I just put brown and magenta on my brush at the same time. I do want to just make sure that I get all of the canvas covered, so you might find that in some areas you just kind of sit there and rub it a little bit in order to get it all covered. But again, I'm just using this loose interpretive kind of brush stroke to get all of these nice pretty colors on here. As I start moving up towards that top right hand corner, that's when I'm going to start utilizing more of the magenta, white, and yellow to almost imply that the sunshine is up over in the right hand corner. But you could, of course, you don't need to imply anything on yours. If you want to, you can just use that same abstract type of style over the whole thing and just get it all to blend in as these nice, soft, neutral colors. So right now I am going to start picking up a little bit of green, yellow. I have green, yellow, magenta, and white all on my brush at the same time. And I'm going to start adding them in just over here on the right hand side. And as I go towards that top, I'm going to start going a little bit more with my magenta and my yellow and my white and my green. So in essence right now, I'm not picking up any more brown is kind of the moral to my abstract background story. And then as I go over to that right hand side, I'm going to be using more white and yellow. So it gets to be more of like sunshine over on this right hand side. And of course, like I said, you can have yours looking as pink or as peach or as green or as light as you want to. It's all going to be up to you what type of mood you want your background to be in. I'm really just going for something that's nice and soft and complementary, and it's going to get my moth and my beautiful flowers to just pop right out of the canvas. So as I'm getting towards the end here, I will start to, if I feel that some of my paint is on the thicker side and I want it to blend a little bit more, I can use a looser type brush stroke where I'm not pressing as hard, and I can almost just kind of continue to paint these colors together as they're drying. So that helps to make it a little bit softer looking. If you still have wet paint throughout this process and you're kind of going towards the end and you're like, oh, I like it, but it's a little on the rough side looking, and if you want it to be a little bit softer, then you can just sit here and blend those colors in a little bit more. So I'm not using much pressure on my brush. I'm just kind of taking it, and wherever I feel that there's an extra thick spot or I want it to be blended just a little bit more, I'll use that light brush stroke. I feel like I want it a little bit lighter and more pink up in this top right hand corner, so I'm adding a bit more white. So you can certainly continue to tweak yours as much as you want to. You could add a second layer on top of it if you wanted to, or you can add additional colors, whatever you feel is going to get your background into a visual place that is pleasing to you, because that's all that matters. It's your painting. You got to like it. You don't necessarily have to like it, but if you do like it, that just adds to the excellent experience of painting. And then once you've got it in the colors that you want, we are actually going to be using our chalk for the next step. So you can, once you've got this all done, keep fiddling with it as much as you want to. And once you've got it all done, oh, you can paint your edges or the sides of your canvas too. So just know that you have the option to do that if you want to. And then you can put your large brush away, take out your piece of chalk, and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're gonna do for the next step is we are doing an outline for our moth. We're gonna be using our chalk as our drawing utensil. I do wanna forewarn you though that before you start this step that you do wanna make sure that your canvas is dry. It'll be much easier to dry on it, or to draw on it if it's dry. So, you know, you can either take that extra long break if you'd like to, or you can find some kind of fanning method, blowing on it works if you need to, or you can just do as I did and whip out a blow dryer to get it dry if yours isn't already dry. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a couple of markers, and then we'll just kind of connect those dots, and hopefully by the time we're done we'll have something that is representational of a lunar moth. So, or a Luna moth, sorry, mispronunciation there. So we're going to find about the center of our canvas. So in order to do that, you can kind of go on the upper portion of your canvas and just eyeball the center. And then you can do the same thing on the left-hand side or the right-hand side, depending on if you're lefty or righty, and kind of eyeball the halfway point. I would say mine's about here. And then just kind of move your fingers together. And when they hit, you're about in the center of your canvas, and you can make yourself a bit of a mark. It doesn't have to be exactly in the center. I just have mine there for ease of drawing purposes. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up about 2 inches, and I'm going to come over to the left until I'm about 2 inches away from the edge of my canvas, and I'm making myself another marker. And then what I'm going to do is I'm coming all the way over to the right hand side of my canvas, and I'm going to go almost halfway between where this where the center is and the bottom of my canvas, maybe a little shy of that. So it's maybe 1/3 of the way up my canvas and in maybe about 2.5 inches. That's going to be another marker. And then the next marker I'm going to make is right here. So if you were to draw a diagonal line from your center dot to the bottom corner of your canvas, if you come down maybe about 3.5 inches in that direction, make yourself a marker. That'll put you in the similar vicinity to me. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to connect all of my dots. So when I connect the right one to, or the center one to the right one, I'm just giving a very gentle curve to it. It does not have to be a severe curve, just a real gentle kind of curve. And then I'm going to do the same thing coming over onto the left hand side. Again, just a real ever so faint kind of curve, something like that. Then from that center area, I'm going to make the top part of what's going to be, I guess, the head of the moth of sorts. So I'm going to go about 1 inch to the left and 1 inch to the right and just make myself a little bit of a top part of a oval, I guess, somewhere around there. And then I'm going to come down in through here, and I'm just going to give myself another little shapes, something like this. It gets a little bit more narrow at the bottom. So this is maybe about 1.5 inches tall, something like that. And then what I'm going to do is I am going to be going from this dot. I'm going to actually make myself the bottom 2 pieces of the wings. They almost look like little tails that are coming down, like kind of like kites to me. So I'm going to go from right about here. This is going to be where the wings kind of separate. So I'm going to take this from here. I'm almost going straight towards that corner. It doesn't have to be totally straight. I like to have a little bit of movement in it, and I'm going to give it just a little bump out in through here. I'm stopping when I'm about maybe, somewhere about 2 inches away from here, and I've moved it a little bit to the left. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down on the inside edge in through here, and I'm going to kind of bring it away a little bit, and then just kind of bring it somewhere down in through there. And then what I'm going to do, about halfway between the tips of these and here, is where I'm going to bring this little tail part up to. So what I'm going to do is I'm from this little edge, I think I'm going to bring this over in this direction. There we go. From this little edge, I'm going to come over in this vicinity. And when I get about halfway up, that's where I'm going to stop. So I'm just kind of trailing, making a little tail of sorts coming up that side. On the left hand side, now because our moth is at a diagonal position, I'm just going to kind of go at that same diagonal over onto this side. That's going to put me in a good position. And then I just kind of create what I want to have as the little end tail piece here. And I want mine a little bit different from the left to the right. So that's how I'm going to create those. Now we have to connect these ends to these markers in through here. So these are going to represent the outside wings and then the inside, the bottom tail wings that connect to here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do my outside wings first. And how I'm going to do this is I'm going to come, if I was to kind of draw a diagonal line, an imaginary diagonal line from here to here, I'm going to make a mark about halfway between here and here. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. I'll mark between here and here about halfway up that area. That's going to be my guide as to where the bottom of these top wings is. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect the corner to the dot to up here. So here we go. I'm going to take my corner in through here. I'm going to round it back towards this direction. I'm going to bring it and make sure that it hits my mark, and then I'm going to swing it back up to about halfway into that head. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. So I'm going to swing it down in this area. So I have that little kind of point to the edge of the wing. Then I'm going to swing it down, hit my marker, and then roll it kind of back up until I get it about halfway up that head on that side. Now all I need to do is I'm going to connect these little markers to here. So I'm going to take this, and I can take it from either side. This is going to be this bottom part of the wing, and I'm going to swing it all the way in through here and then back like that. And I'll do the same thing over on this left-hand side. So I'm going to go from this marker, I'm going to swing it in towards this, this tail piece that I made, and just connect it. And of course you can do any little tweaks that you want, but that is all we're going to be doing for our outline. So once you've got that in place, you can put your chalk away. We're going to be using our medium brush for the next step, so you can just get ready. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're doing the base coat for our moth. The colors that we're using are green, yellow, white, and brown. So how I'm going to do this is I'm going to be giving myself a base coat of green, a light yellowy green for most of it, and then we'll do a base coat of a light yellow for the head and a little shadow between the wings, but you'll see what I'm going to do. So I'm going to do this. I'm using my medium brush. This is the green color that I'm going for. So how I got to that was I took some of my green, a little bit of the yellow. The yellow can really overpower the situation, so I would just add a tiny bit of yellow at a time and a little bit of white. White is very powerful too. And I just kind of spin it around and see if that's in the value that I want, and it's not. I want it a little bit lighter, and I think I've got enough yellow in it, but I'm just going to kind of spin it around until I get it light enough. And once I get it light enough, if I need to add a little bit more yellow, I will. These Luna moths are like a very pale, I would say like a pale lime green kind of color, but they do come in different shades. There are actually white Luna moths, there are brown Luna moths, but the most typical color is this pale green color. So that's looking pretty good to me, maybe a tiny bit more yellow. And then once you've got your desired shade, then really all you're going to be doing is you're going to be coloring in the wings. But before I start coloring them in, what I'm going to do with my dirty brush is I'm going to pick up a little bit of brown paint. So I have my green and a little bit of brown, and I'm going to give myself a quick kind of outline between these top wings like this, the top wing and the bottom wing. So I have brown and my green on there, and it doesn't have to be anything perfect. This is just giving you a visual separation, as well as the head. So something like this. And I'm just giving myself a little soft line. So once I have that, you can just take your brush and wipe it off on your paper towel, and then pick up some of your green, and then you're just going to be painting in your wings. So I'm not going to paint in the head. I'll do that with my light yellow color that we'll do in a minute, but I'm going to go all the way to the tip of my wings, and you can use a lot of paint because it's going to be a while before we do any additional details on these. So if you want to use a good amount of paint just to get a good coverage, you can feel free to do so. These moths Some of them have really smooth edges to them, and some of them have little rippled edges to them. So if you end up with yours with a little bit of a ripple along the edge, that's okay too. So don't worry terribly about making it super duper perfect, because they do come in a few different varieties in the shapes of them. And again, I'm just going right up to my chalk mark. And if your chalk mark doesn't totally disappear at this point, you can certainly wipe it away with water after you're done, or you can just paint over it with a future step. We're going to be doing some additional markings on the moth, so you can certainly, if you don't get all the way to your chalk marks at this point, that's all right. And again, this is just the first coat of this, so we're not going for perfection at this point. We're just going for our base coat, just making sure I get all the way to my brown area. And then I'm going to go ahead and do these internal little sections in here. And I am going to try and make sure that I keep that gap between these bottom wings, because that provides a good effect, a good visual effect as we go through this process. So I'm just bringing this down to the tip in through here, just making sure I go all the way to my chalk. And again, if you have little residue of chalk that you want to get rid of, you can certainly do that with a touch of water. And I'm just bringing it all the way. Well, I brought that a little bit too much in through there, so nothing my fingers can't wipe away. And then once we get this step done, we are going to be utilizing this same paintbrush for the next, oh, actually, sorry, we have to do our little first coat on the head. So let me just get this main area of the wings done. Almost got it here. And for the color of the head, what I'm going to do, I'm doing a soft transition from the wings into the head. So as I'm painting this, I'm kind of painting over that brown area a little bit, so it ends up transitioning nice and natural into the head. And I just need to get this little section over here covered. And then I'm going to wash and dry this brush to do to get myself another color for the head. So just washing and drying my brush. And the head is just going to be a light yellow. So I'm going to take a tiny bit of yellow. And again, the yellow, oops, my chalk has landed in my paint, so we'll have to get rid of that. I'm going to take just a dot of yellow and a little bit of white and get myself this pale, kind of like a lemon yellow, maybe a little bit lighter or darker, doesn't have to be exactly lemon. And then I'm just going to color in a base coat for the head. I'm going right to the edge. I'm going right to the brown area. When you get to the brown area at that, we'll call it the neck, you can do that uneven kind of paint stroke in through there so they start to transition into one another. And then we're going to utilize this same brush for the next step. So once you've got your base coat on your body and on your head, you can wash and dry this medium brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to be doing for the next step is we're doing the first step of our flowers. I'm going to be using my medium brush. The colors that I'm using are black, brown, magenta, and purple. And how I'm going to do this is I'm going to put, I'll call them place markers, but I guess they would be the stems of the flowers in place. And then we're going to just put a first layer of the flowers in place. So I'm going to have four stems of these flowers, and I'm going to have them kind of at different heights. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put black and brown on my brush, and I'm going to have these flowers are pretty darn straight. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of mark myself where I want those flowers to, the stems to kind of be. You can certainly space yours differently. I was thinking I was just going to have kind of two next to each other over here and two next to each other over here with varying heights. So I just kind of spaced maybe 2 inches, 2 inches, and then maybe this came, I don't know, 3 inches and then 2 inches. So you could certainly make yours wherever you want, but that's how I'm gonna do mine. So I have brown and black on my brushes, the colors that I'm gonna be using for my stem color. And the one on the right, I'm really just making lines. So I'm gonna do a vertical line. This one's gonna go from the top of my canvas and then just go all the way down to the bottom of my canvas. You're gonna bump into your moth. These flowers are gonna be going behind, so you just kind of skip over the moth, make sure that it kind of looks nice and natural, and I'm gonna push my brush harder so my line gets a little bit wider down at the bottom. Most of this line is gonna get hidden, so feel free to not feel it necessary to make it perfect. My next one I'm going to have a little bit shorter than that first one, so I'm going to start this one maybe somewhere in through here. And again, it doesn't have to be perfectly vertical, but I'm going to try and make mine pretty vertical, and then I'm just going to follow that down wherever it lands here. I'm going to go ahead and bring that all the way down to the bottom and just push my brush a little bit firmer so it gets a little bit wider down at the bottom. These two I'm going to have at varying heights. Maybe this one's going to be somewhere between these two heights, so I think I'll start this one somewhere in here. And again, just giving myself a vertical line. Because I'm using both brown and black on my brush at the same time, I'm getting, you might not be able to detect it in the video, but I'm getting varying shades of this darkness. And again, not much of it's going to show anyways, but if any of it does show, at least I'll have some kind of dimensional element to it. And then I'm just skipping my little wings in through here and then coming down all the way to the bottom, pushing my brush a little bit firmer at the bottom to get it to widen just a little bit. And again, if you bump into your moth, that's okay. We're going to be able to correct that when we finish it, when we do the details. This one I think I'm going to have between the height of this one and this one, so I'm just going to go up just a little bit from here. And again, I just like my heights to be different on stuff like this, but you could certainly have all of yours in equal height. It's all right. And then this one looks like it's going to actually kind of ride down the side of this wing, which I didn't plan for that, but it's going to give a nice visual effect. It'll have nice dark flowers next to the bright moth, which is going to be really pretty. And then I'm just going to bring it all the way down to the bottom. And then what we're going to do is you don't even have to wash and dry your brush. We're going to do the first layer on the actual flowers themselves. So the colors I'm using are going to be purple and magenta. And I'm going to work from the bottom of the stem all the way to the top. These flowers they look like upside down kind of bells. They almost resemble the bud on a lily of the valley, only they're purple. So if you're familiar with those kind of flowers, they look like an upside down little bell. So that's what we're going to be doing. I'm going to have them overlapping each other, and because I'm just doing the first coat, you're not going to see a whole bunch of detail, but we'll get good shape on them, and then that'll be able to allow us to blend or to build them into some nice, beautiful, bright flowers. So I'm not washing my brush. I'm going to pick up purple and magenta, and every time I pick up my brush or reload my brush, I'm going to reload it with those two colors. So as I build my way up, I'm going to have these varying shades of between purple and magenta as my nice base coat. I'm going to start at the bottom because one, I still have black and brown on my brush, so this is going to add a nice dark value to some of these down at the bottom, and I'm going to make them in the shape of a little bell. So I have it kind of a semicircle at the top, and then I kick it out at the bottom. So these will end up overlapping each other, so you can have some coming over on the side. I'm going to have some all the way down at the bottom, so I'm just going to color in some of that darkness down there. Since I still have the black and brown a little bit on my brush, I'm going to do a couple more down in through this vicinity just so I have some darkness to the flowers down here. And then as I work my way up the flowers, they'll get lighter and lighter. As you come towards the areas where you're touching the moth, all you really need to do is pull some of the color of the flower outside or next to it. You don't have to feel like you have to put the entire representation of the whole flower in there. It can just be the little tail of the flower, or the side piece. So don't feel the need to make every single flower extremely detailed, especially when you're going to hit the moth, because you'd only see part of it. So don't feel the need to make it into an extremely detailed type of flower. And so I'm going to go ahead and do this down in through here. I'm just working my way up. I am going to have some of them go in front of others. The real most difficult part about doing a flower, especially like this, is to not be too consistent. So as I'm going, I tend to be on the messier side, and I do that so it looks natural. So they're in a chaotic type of formation. If I was to sit here and think, okay, well, I did one on this side, now I have to go and do one on this side, now I have to go do one on this side, and place them all perfectly, then it's not going to look as natural. So as you're doing it, just know you can pop one out a little bit further than the other one. You can make, just a piece kind of stick out in through here. So just know that you can be on the chaotic side, get them to go in front of one another, get some to kind of poke out where you wouldn't think that one would poke out, and that's how it's going to look the most natural. These flowers do tend to be a little bit fuller at the bottom of the stalk or of the stem. So I'm kind of spending a little bit more time down at this bottom area just to make sure that I'm getting them, I'm putting enough volume in it. I am kind of, still working from the bottom up, but I'm just making sure that I've got these kind of poking out enough for me. So as I start to build my detail, I'm going to have enough good volume on here. And some of them kind of just droop down, and they just kind of, their little bell feathers, petals, they're petals, not feathers. Their little bell petals just kind of stick out along the edge. So have fun with the formation of these. This one's got a lot of magenta on it, which is beautiful. These colors look so nice next to the Luna color, so I'm excited about this. And then maybe I'm just going to work my way up in through here. And again, I don't have to form them exactly the same. Maybe this one is just going to have a long one in here. Maybe I've got one that's coming out over the side, and I'm imagining the bell part to be underneath the actual wing itself. So you can have fun with how these come out. Maybe this one, feel like I want another one kind of out in through here, just to again fill in that space in through there. And I'm just working my way up. So again, in through where it hits the moth, don't feel like you have to have the bottom of a flower at each one. I'm just going to kind of put some color where it meets the moth, something like this. And then maybe I've got the little ends in through there. Maybe I've got the top of another one in through here. Maybe I've just got a little piece flicking out over here. So again, don't feel that you have to make it visible. It's not going to be leaning over the moth. It's going to be sitting behind it. So I'm going to just kind of tackle this section in through here so I don't get lost in what I want to do. And I'm just putting some of the petal color, the base color in through here, and now I can start maybe forming a couple of the actual bell kind of shapes up above. So as this flower gets towards the top, it begins to get really narrow. So it's almost as if kind of like a pine tree, how it gets really skinny up at the top. So as I move towards the top, I'm going to be making my blossoms or my petals smaller. So I'm just going to kind of tackle these other ones that I feel would be on the bigger side. And then when I get up towards those little ones up at the top, I'm going to start to make them much smaller so you can see them. They're going to be more evident, but they're going to be much smaller. And when we add the details on later, they'll pop out a lot as well. So I'm just kind of continuing on here. I think I want to have a really big one over in through here that just kind of leans over this one a little bit. That one's going to be a nice big one. And you'll find that as you build your own version of this, that, you know, maybe you want yours more on the magenta side, maybe you want yours more on the purple side. You can really just kind of do it to your own visual preference, because these flowers are so beautiful. They come in all these different shades of lavender and pink, and you know, they're just a really pretty, delicate kind of flower with these beautiful little bells on them. And so as I'm getting towards the top, now's where I'm going to start to kind of narrow it in. And again, I'm just kind of doing a little round top and bringing these out over the side. And again, you can't really see too much detail to it right now, simply because we're just doing the base coat of it. But when we go to add the highlights onto it later, you'll be able to really detect these bell shapes. But right now it's just kind of getting them on here. I am going to start as I get towards the top, it's going to be less of a bell shape and more of just kind of a little mark to get those colors to be represented up at the top without actually creating that whole shape to it. And then we are going to be using our small brush for the next step. So once you've got your beautiful base coat for your flowers on here, you can take this large or this medium brush, put it away wherever you'd like to, and take out your small brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're painting the veins and the highlights of our wings. Maybe a little shadow too, but mostly veins and highlights. So I'm going to be using my small brush. The colors that I'm going to use are that base coat that we created, that light green. I'll also be using yellow and white, and I may use the green oxide as well if I need to make it lighter or darker or anything in through there. But I'll call out the colors as I use them. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to make myself more of that light yellow. So I'm just using white and just a maybe a little pink by accident, white with just a tiny touch of my yellow. I don't want this to go too yellow, but I also want it a little bit darker than white. So that's why I'm just making myself that little bit of a lemon yellow kind of color. So once I have that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be doing an outline around my wings, and I'll do the veins. I'll start the veins with them as well. So I have that pale yellow kind of color. I'm just going to do a loose type of outline around these wings. I've discovered that these wings can have really distinct outlines around them, or they can be really soft and just bright at the edge and transition into the mid color. So if your line ends up firm or soft, it's okay. It's going to work out. You can also, if you wanted to, this could be a great opportunity to ripple some of your edges as well if you wanted to. So as I go through this process, I'm not pressing hard. I'm just kind of getting this light color along the edges of my wings. I'm going to bring this all the way down to where we had that bit of a shadow type area down below. I'm bringing it all the way up in through here. And I'm just going to kind of continue that along all of the wings. So I'm just giving myself a little bit of an outline along the edge. These little tail pieces of sorts, again, you could do this distinct outline around the edges, or you can get it to just kind of fade into the green, the main section of green itself. So that's this one. When I get to this one over here, I have these wings in essence kind of lay on top of each other. So I've got this right one as kind of the top wing that sits kind of on top of that one. So I'm going to do a little bit of a lighter line in through here. This is going to merge into the head area. So this is all going to kind of act as a little bit of a highlight, and I'll make it look a little bit better in a couple of minutes. But right now what I'm doing is just, I did my outline and then I'm just kind of blending in that light color into that main region. And then I'm going to continue on with just doing the outline of sorts around the actual wings themselves. So again, I'm just doing a light sketcherly line, and I'll show you how there are going to be certain places where I personally am going to want to blend it in to the green, but I'm just kind of getting it started by just doing this light little outline. I'm going to go ahead and do this one in through here, and again I'm just using that light yellowish kind of color. Mine looks like it's a little bit more on the whiter side than the head, but that's all right. I'll add a bit more yellow to it in a minute. And if you bump into any wet flowers, it's okay, just paint the color in. I say that because I just felt my pinky go into some wet paint around the around that flower. But now that I've got the edges on here, what I'm going to do, I have my veins and my highlights, and I'm going to kind of do them all together. My highlight of sort is going to be on the head. It's going to kind of blend itself into this area in through here. I have highlights on the tips of my wings, and I also have highlights wherever I want the wing to look like it's kind of rippled or bumping out towards us. So if you want these little tail pieces to look like they're bumping out, you can put a little bit of a highlight on an area of sorts, just similar to what I did here with this highlight here that made that area look like it's bumping out a little bit. These wings are almost, think of them like fabric or a piece of paper that can have ripples in it. So that's what I'm going to be utilizing as my highlight type areas. But I also want there to look like there's little veins too. So it's going to be kind of streaky and stripy. I am going to be doing my veins and in a directional kind of brush stroke. They'll be coming out of this area and they're going to come in through here. I'll have little veins maybe coming off of the bottom of the wings, especially these ones, and just kind of bringing them into the main section. Once I get going, I'll probably go pretty fast. My brush will start to whip around, but just know that I'm going to be utilizing during this process that light color that we just made, that light yellow, white, as well as this base color in through here. And I will call them out as I pick them up, but I'm not always the greatest when I'm doing it really fast and I just start picking up one of those three colors and forget to tell you, but I'll give it a good shot. So I'm going to start with a little bit of white on my brush, and I'm going to do my highlighted area on the head. So I've got white on my brush, and I want this kind of the top part of the head where I feel it would be closest to us to be the brightest. So I'm really just taking white and rubbing it in and getting it to blend with that base color that we created earlier. And then I'll take that base color and just make sure I have good coverage. Make sure that those two blend in together. I've got some good coverage, and then I'll also get it to almost look like it's coming into this section as well. So I want these two to really talk together, but still have little areas that look like they almost dip down into the, we'll call it the neck region of our moth. I don't know if they really have a neck region, but that's what we'll call it. And then I'm going to just kind of make sure that they talk well together. And then once I've got that, I'm reloading my brush with a bit of white paint because I want these tips to be really, that's going to be kind of my brightest of bright area, is that tip in through there. I'll go ahead and do it on the other side with a bunch of white. So when I'm doing a a step like this where I really want it to look very natural. I tend to use a lot of paint on my brush so everything blends together. You can utilize a lot of paint or so it's fluid or a little bit of water on your brush. So I'm going to be tackling these veins, and when I tackle them and I'm going in this direction, if I don't have enough fluidity on my brush, I'm not going to get a full stroke in. It'll just kind of stop halfway. So if you want that full stroke to happen and to have kind of a nice long type fluid motion to your brush stroke, you have to have fluid paint on your brush, or a brush with long bristles. That will help you to get these longer strokes. So I'm getting the top part of the wing to look a little bit lighter. I am doing these directional kind of brush strokes as it's coming down this wing in through here, making sure that I've got my edges as bright as I want them to be. Just added a little bit of white, maybe a little hint of just the yellow on that little tip in through there. I'm picking up some of that original green and the green oxide right now, just to give myself a bit of a little more dimension in here. Little darkness is going to put a little bit of a ripple in through there. And now I'm just going to kind of move on to this wing in through here. So I did that bright edge on the tip. Now I'm just picking up some of that lighter yellow kind of color. I'm going to start in the same type of direction that I did over here, so they look like they belong together. And I'm just going to kind of keep loading my brush and getting as many of these veins on here as I want to. And I do want them to talk or to make sense with the edge of the wing as well. So if you feel yourself wanting to kind of pull some of these edges up from the bottom up into those veins, feel free to do so. That looks nice and natural on these. You could even do that on this side if you felt that you wanted to do that. That'll also make the wing look a little bit more rippled, which will make it look nice. So I'm going to go ahead and continue to get my veins on this particular wing. And of course, you can dip your brush back into the light green that we utilized for the base coat. That is also going to help you to make it look very nice and natural if you've got those colors talking to one another. And then I think I'm going to do the same thing that I did over here, which was pick up some of that green oxide and put a little bit just in through this area, in through here, just to give it a little bit more dimension. And of course, you could go into the brown. You could, if you wanted it to have a little bit more of an earthy tone to it, you could certainly do that. And then as I get down into these ones down here, I'm just going to utilize my light yellow as my vein kind of color, and it's also going to be my highlight type of color as well. So I'm just pulling these veins up in this direction from the bottom. I can hear my dogs already. They're like, hey, we know that you're videotaping again, so I might have to press pause in a minute, but we'll see if they find a way to calm themselves down. But I'm going to put a little bit of a light area in through here just to give myself that bit of a highlight, pulling up some of these. Again, we'll just refer to them as little veins. Think of them as also, like veins in a flower. They don't necessarily have to be in a perfect direction, but they can certainly, they have an implied direction as to where they're coming from. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing over on this side. I want this, maybe I'll have a little bit of a light area in here to tell that this piece of my wing is kind of a little bit bumped out a bit. And then, you can make your veins. You just want to make sure that you kind of put them in the same direction as you did on the other side. I almost just made the mistake of putting them going in the opposite arcing motion, but that would have been an easy correct if I did it. And then I'm just kind of bringing some of these up in through here. And you're going to see right in through here, it's going to start to emerge where this is going to be a little bit of a shadowed area, because I'm just adding a bit more of a highlight in through here. As I get down into these two little tail feathers, I get to decide which part of them is going to pop out. So I think I'm going to have this little section in through here pop out a little bit. So I'm just adding a bit of a highlight in through there. I'm going to do the same thing over here. I think I want, let's get this area to pop out in through here. And you can see just as I'm adding these light colored areas, it allows that tiny bit of a section to pop out. And I think I can do something cute down here, which is just giving myself a little bit of an edge. I'm going to give myself a little bit more of a highlight in through here. Just bring that sunshine down into this little tail wing of sorts. And then maybe I'll take some of my green oxide and that green and put this little piece that kind of flips up over on the other side. You can really have fun with making these tail pieces do whatever you want. You can have one flipping up, you can have one, you know, just kind of hanging out there. You can make them into whatever you'd like to do, and you can always just bring back some of that original, the background green, and then you can just kind of keep tweaking this until you feel that you've got enough highlights, enough dimension on it. If you did need or want to add a little bit more shadow underneath these two wings, let's say you know you're painting along and your shadow disappeared, you can take a teeny bit of brown paint, and if you want the original green, the pre-mixed green that we did, and just add that bit of a shadow underneath this wing, that's going to give it a whole bunch of dimension. Even if you just have a teeny tiny bit of a line underneath there, that's going to really tell the viewer that this is a three-dimensional beautiful moth. So you can play with that as much as you need or want to. And then let's see, we are going to be using our medium brush for the next step. So once you've got all of these areas kind of talking to each other, I did notice that the head really kind of talks, and they all look so soft, like they're all touching and merging with one another. So that's what I'm trying to get the appearance of in through here. So you can certainly, you know, again, modify yours as much as you want. You can add little pops of the brighter yellow wherever you'd like to, and you can tell I'm having fun just tweaking mine. But you want more time to tweak yours or less time to tweak yours, but you can see just as I'm adding these bits of colors, it's just coming more to life, and I will just continue to do this until I am pleased with how it looks, and it might just be a matter of me elevating my my little lighter tones a bit, but I think I'm pretty happy with the way that it looks right now. So I am going to get ready for the next step with my medium brush, so you can too. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is the second step to our flowers. I'm going to be using my medium brush. The colors that I'm using are magenta, purple, and white. And what we're in essence going to be doing is putting the highlights on these, on the flower petals themselves, so they start to emerge and look three-dimensional. So whereas we did the first step, we started at the bottom ones, this step I'm going to start at the top ones. And what I'm going to in essence do is I'm going to be putting a highlight on the outside of that particular flower petal or little section of the flower. And so if I'm working in through here, I can put a highlight on the outside of that petal, which then will kind of cast a shadow on the top of the one underneath it. So I'm starting at the top so I can put the shadows on the outside pieces, not the pieces that are tucked underneath the other petals of these flowers. So it sounds a little complicated, but once I get going, you'll understand that it's not as complicated as it sounds. I'm going to be using quite a bit of paint on my brush, and I'm looking to really just accentuate the highlights, but I may end up needing to put a second coat over all of the work that we've done already. This is in essence kind of the base coat that gave us some structure as to how we're going to build these, but you want to make sure that they look fully rendered, so you might have to put a second coat over all of them. So without further ado, let's go. So I'm going to put purple, magenta, and a little bit of white on my brush at the same time. You might find that you want yours more on the lavender side, and in which case you would use less magenta. If you want them more on the pink side, you would use less purple. So you can kind of tweak this as you want visually. So once I've got the color on my brush, I'm going to just kind of start at the top and work my way down. So if this is kind of, I'll say this might be an outside flower, I need a little bit more white on my brush so you can see. So if this is going to be an outside flower, I can kind of dictate where that highlight goes. So now I've got that little bottom part of the petal just kind of emerging from underneath the other one. So if I've got this one in through here, I can see that maybe this one can go in front of here, something like that. And if you find that you wanted to add a dark part up at the top, you could just come back with some of that darker color, or if you wanted to add a little bit more of a highlight on the one above it, just add a little bit more of the white and you can put it coming right in front of it. So I'm just going to kind of continue here with my, I got to figure out which one goes in front of which. So I think this one's going to go in front, this one's going to be my front one, this one's going to be my side one. So you can see as I'm coming down, I'm going to decide what goes in front of what. So these just went in front of this one back here. So really all I need to do is kind of add the highlights to the tip of this flower that's just kind of emerging from underneath that one. So some of them you're going to see the tops, some of them you're not. So in here I can kind of detect that I can see the whole top to this one. So I'm just adding all of the whole, a second coat on the whole thing. I can add little brighter ends to them, so that's going to make them look like they're being hit by the sunshine a bit more. I've got this one over here, so I can only kind of see the edges of that one. And of course, if you need to scoot your brush in with a little bit darker underneath just so you have a full coverage, you can certainly do that. And I'm just going to kind of keep going. As I go down this flower, I can see that I've got little ones poking out in through here, and I know I need a full coverage back behind there because it looks like I can see through it, so I just know that I need to finish that part. And then as I get down towards this bottom area, I'm just kind of looking for those little pieces that might be sticking out or that I feel that I might see the top. So here I can see this round brush stroke that I made, so that's going to dictate to me that that flower is in fact in front of the one behind it. And then I can just kind of play with the tips of the other ones that are nearby. I think I want a little bit more of the lavender color on the top of that one. And you can, of course, just kind of keep playing with which ones are in front of the other ones. But that's my goal, is I'm trying to find the ones that are in front and add a bit of a highlight to them and to the tips of those petals that are just maybe catching a bit of the sunshine, or you know, they're just emerging from behind the other one. And as I get down towards the bottom, of course I still want to maintain that these are of the bell shape, but you, again, when you get down towards the bottom, you might just be seeing little bits and pieces of some of the flowers, so you don't have to go full on into them all. So I'm going to go ahead and start at the top of this one over here. So I just reloaded my brush. Now that you've got the idea, you'll probably notice my brush is going to go a bit faster now. I'm looking for the ends that are popping out, as well as any tops that I might need to fully paint because I can see them. So I'm looking for some tops and these little pieces that are popping out, and any little pieces that I feel might need a bit more rendering or a little bit more highlight to them. I can continue to fiddle with them. And again, if you want yours more pink or more lavender, or if something's not popping out as much as you want it, you might need higher contrast, which would mean to make it lighter or darker. So if this was not popping out enough for me, it would mean that I need either a bit more highlight to it so you can see those tips, or maybe I needed to make it darker so it sat, you know, it could sit back behind something. So just know that if sometimes when we're doing a step like this where we are using multiple colors and we're trying to just see things and give the information kind of in a quick sketcherly type fashion, sometimes what happens is we end up over blending our paint because we have so many. I have 3 colors on my brush at all times, so I run the risk of over blending and over painting. So if that happens, I can just kind of let a section dry, come back and add that additional bit of contrast onto it, or I can just start utilizing different tones and shades of those colors as I go through the painting process. So just know that, you know, if something doesn't go the way that you had totally planned it to go, just let it dry for a minute and you can completely just come back and make your little modifications. And the whole goal is to enjoy the process. So don't feel that it has to look exactly like a photograph. Mine certainly does not look like a photograph. I'm just going for a nice loose interpretation of these flowers, and I will continue to kind of tweak them as I feel they need. And I'm just going to kind of go up to this left hand side and start these ones. Again, I've got my all 3 colors are on my brush right now. I'm starting with these tips and the ones that I feel that I can see the tops of them, and then I will work my way down into the ones that are below. And you know, these type of flowers, they do kind of overlap one another, so you would naturally kind of have some shadows and some of the pieces just kind of flicking out along the edges, and they would overlap, and you'd have these bright little petals that just kind of poke out from underneath and just kind of emerge. So if you find yourself just wanting to have fun and just kind of flick your brush here and there, you'll probably most likely get the most natural appearance by doing that. So you don't have to be too systematic. Just enjoy the process. Get these to kind of overlap one another. Get these little petals to kind of pop out here and there. And as long as you've got that little almost kind of flick motion down at that bottom, and if you've got a couple where you can see that little bell shape at the top, you're going to sell the story. You don't always have to have every single one fully rendered as if it's a photograph. You can just give the impression or the implication that they are in fact that type of flower by using a correct or a representational color palette, by giving the information of these pieces kind of flicking out over the edges, or maybe 1 or 2 of them is really in focus and looks right, and that's going to tell the viewer, oh yeah, these are ladybell flowers, but again, you don't have to do every single one of them exactly in its own space. They can, again, just overlap one another. You can have the little bits of the ends just kind of poking out, and you can have lots of shadows, and the pinks showing and the lavender showing. And then I'm just gonna, now that I've got them on here, I just pick up a little bit of white, and if I feel like I want any of these little tips to just kind of pop out even more, I'm just gonna kind of give a little flick at the end of those tips, or maybe at one of the the little top bell little pieces in through here, and I just kind of float around and see if there's any little ones that need a bit more help to be visible. And then once I've got this step done, we are going to be, let's see, what are we going to do for the next step? We're actually going to switch brushes to our small brush. So once you have your beautiful ladybell flowers as rendered as you would like and as visible as you would like, you can put your medium brush away wherever you'd like to. take out your small brush. You can see I'm just kind of flicking these little corners. I'm telling you, just kind of flicking these little corners at the end here really just brings that little tiny bit additional piece of life into it. And then I will be putting this brush away if I can ever stop with painting these flowers and get out my small brush for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're finishing our little details on the moth. So this is going to be the decorative decorations, I guess for lack of a better terminology, markings, I guess would be the right terminology. They've got this really cool brown stripe at the top. Then there's a couple of circular things in through here and a couple of little, they look like eyes in through here, and then the antennas. So I'm going to use my small brush. I'm going to be using brown, yellow, magenta, and white. And how I'm going to do this is I'm going to start with just brown paint, and I'm going to put that stripe at the top in place as well as the circular decorations. So the stripe that goes across the top, it's in essence connects these, it looks like it connects these two wings. So it's going to go from the left side all the way to the right side, and then it kind of trails off and disappears somewhere around here. So where it gets to that real light edge of the wing, it kind of disappears. I'm going to make mine maybe about 1/4 inch wide, and I'm going to go right across the head first. So I've got my small brush. I'm pushing it pretty hard just to kind of get it in through there. I'm giving a hint of a curve, very little, and I just want to give that hint of a curve to give the viewer the information that this is in fact kind of a round or a piece of the moth body that has a little bit of form to it. So you don't have to have firm edges to this line either. It can be nice and soft. It almost looks like it's soft in reality. And then I'm just going to continue this line over the top of that wing, the right wing and the left wing. I'm using a good amount of paint on my brush so I can have a good kind of fluid brush stroke, and you might end up crossing over into your flowers, or you know, it's gonna work out because we've got to put a little highlight. So if you go outside a little bit, that's okay. And then I'm just gonna kind of lift off on my brush, the pressure of my brush, to get this line to kind of disappear over on this corner. And then I'll go ahead and do the same thing over on this left side, trying to keep my hand out of your way. I'm going to start on the left because that's going to keep my hand out of the way better. And so I'm going to just start with a really narrow line in through here. And then as I go towards the right, I'm just pressing it a little bit harder to get it to merge into this one in through here. And then once I've got that line established, it doesn't have to be perfectly executed because we're going to be doing a little bit of a highlight in a minute. We just kind of want it in the right place. I'm going to do, there's little spiral kind of markings in through here. So almost halfway between the head and the tip of your wing, you can just take a little section of this brown and just kind of bring it down, almost like a little bit of a teardrop type of shape, I guess, of sorts, a little oval coming off of that stem. And then I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing over on the left hand side. So I'm coming out like this a little bit and then just giving myself a little bit of a, almost looks like a colon or a semicolon type of grammar mark. And then I'm going to put two little circular eyes in through here. So these are about halfway between the head and the wing in through here. And they're just small, like maybe the size of a pea of sorts. So somewhere in through there. And I'm just using my brown paint. Nothing fancy in through here. And I'm going to let this brown paint sit for a minute while we go and do the antennas. So I'm washing and drying my brush, and to make the antennas, these antennas, they look kind of fluffy to me. I'm sure that's not the right terminology for them, but they have a base to them, and then they have these little tiny, like little tentacle things coming off the sides, and they almost look like little feathers to me. So they're very light and fluffy looking. So I'm making myself a kind of a rusty type color somewhere in this vicinity. That's going to be the base color for these antennas. So how I got to here was I used some of my brown, yellow, magenta, and white. So if you were to just mix magenta and yellow, you're going to get like a peachy orange color, and that mixed with the brown is going to give you this kind of tan type rusty skin color. So I just kind of kept blending them together. I think I need a little bit more yellow and magenta so you can see where I'm headed here. And then this is looking pretty good. I'm going for something similar to that. And then once you've got the color established that you want, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be making our antennas. However, I don't want my brush overloaded. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wash and dry my brush because I want my lines to be really nice and skinny. So I'm washing and drying it in order to get the thick paint that I just clogged it with when I was mixing my paint, to get that out of there. So there's no paint in there. Then what I'm going to do in order to get my brush to be nice and pointy is I like to put it in the paint, rest it on the side of my palette, and just kind of spin it round and round. And you literally just keep spinning it round and round. I keep saying that. There's that song. And what's going to happen is the tip of your brush is really going to get nice and pointy. And anytime your brush starts to splay out on you, that's what you want to do. Make sure that there's not too much paint within those bristles, and then put it back in your paint, push it on the side of your palette, and then just spin it round and round, and you'll have a nice pointy tip. And then when you go to create the line, don't push hard. Because if you push hard, you're going to have a wide line. So what I'm going to do, these antennas are going to be as tall, if not a little bit taller than that whole head portion. They don't have to be straight up. They have a little bit of a curve to them. So I'm going to find somewhere in the middle, a little bit to the left of the middle of the head, I'm going to put myself my first line. They're going to be a little difficult to see when I initially start them here, but once I get the details on them, they'll make more sense. I'm going to do the other one at a little bit different of a height. So I'm just adding this one in through here. And now what I'm going to do is, with that same color, I'm just going to be flicking up these little tiny marks on the left and the right hand side. I realize it's probably kind of difficult to see it on camera at the moment, but I'm going to add some white to it in a second, which will make it much more visible. But right now I'm just doing these little tiny fluffy pieces along the side. Now I'm using that color plus white on my brush, which is going to add a bit of a highlight through this through these antennas. So I'm going right back down that center in a very sketcherly kind of brush stroke, and then I'm going to go ahead and add these little hairy antenna thingies on the sides. And if yours again is not standing out enough, if you're not able to see it as much as you want to because it's on top of something that is in the same tonal value, which is that color behind it, you can certainly add more brightness or more darkness to it. So for me, I'm just adding a little bit more white, so it is lighter than the stuff that it is on top of. But you could use a little bit of your dark brown if you wanted to add a bit of a shadow of sorts within there. So if you go into a particular area, I just put a tiny bit of brown on my brush so you could see what would happen. And you could, if it was on top of a light area, that would help to make it stand out a bit more. So whatever works for you in order to be able to see this detail, you can certainly adjust your brightness or darkness in order to get it to be visible. And then once it's as visible as you want it, doesn't have to be a main focal point, it's just a little accent. Now I'm going to utilize that same color that I used for the antennas as my highlight color of this brown marker at the top. So I'm just reloading my brush. I'm adding a bit of this lighter color up towards the top. I'll use white in a second as well, but this is just going to get my highlight of sorts started so it looks nice and kind of fluffy. Now I'm adding a touch of white on my brush to get it nice and bright up towards the top of that marking. And then once I've got this area as light as I want, I'm going to go ahead and add the bits of detail in those in the markings or the pattern of sorts. And of course you can have this lighter if you wanted it to be really, really bright, bright, bright. You could add a bit of yellow to this highlight and that will make it a bit brighter. And you can sit it next to a darker color, whatever works for you. Now I'm going to go ahead and use that same rusty kind of color to start this marking highlights in through here. So I'm just kind of adding a bit of a semicircle kind of motion. I'm not covering the whole area. Now I'm adding a bit of white to my brush without washing my brush and adding a bit of that, a little bit of a highlight in through there. And then I'm going to add a little tiny highlight in through here. And of course I'm just kind of using a loose interpretation of these markings. You can certainly get them a little bit more detailed if you wanted. You could also pick up a little bit of brown and black to do if they weren't in focus enough. You can use your brown and black to add little shadows of sorts or more fine-tuned detail if you wanted to. That's totally up to you. And then we have another step to go on our flowers. It's going to be with this small brush. So once you've got all of your little details on your beautiful moth, you can wash and dry this small brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're finishing our flowers. So really what we're going to be doing is adding little tiny leaves, green kind of leaves throughout the flowers, mostly at the top. I'll sprinkle a couple down below, and we're going to add some bright little highlights. So what I noticed with these flowers is they, in essence, the flower buds kind of start growing at the top as little green type buds. So, and then they just kind of merge into leaves throughout the flower. I know my terminology is not the most professional when it comes to talking about flowers, but I just paint what I see, and that's what I see, and these are my layman terms, but it works for me. So I'm going to use my small brush. The colors I'm using are my moth green, so that light green that our custom green that we made. I'll probably use a little bit of my green oxide, yellow, and white. So I'm going to start with my moth green to put them in place. So I've got some up at the top, and I'm just kind of utilizing a dotting or dabbing type technique. I do not need to put them everywhere. I'm just going to kind of sporadically pick a couple of spots and put some, I think that was a little too aggressive in through there. I'm going to put some kind of behind some of my flowers, maybe some kind of go a little bit in between them. Maybe I've got some coming down in through here. Really, I'm just kind of looking to add that additional pop of color throughout these flowers. In through here, I noticed that the green I was using was pretty similar to that background color, so I just picked up some of my green oxide, the darker green, so I could actually see them appear down in through here. So again, if your color is too similar to what it's sitting on, you need to add more contrast to it, so make it lighter or darker. So I'm going to go ahead and add some up in through here, and again, I'm just kind of dabbing my brush in order to get these visible green kind of marks. And then as I get they're smaller at the top, and as they come down into the plant itself, they get a little bit bigger. But I'm not going to do too much down in through here, maybe just one or two, just to give you that idea that there's something down there. And then I'm going to go ahead and do a couple up top here. And again, I'm just starting with that green from my moth, and then I will be adding some additional little highlights to it in a moment. So just kind of dabbing it here and there and everywhere. Maybe put a couple of the darker ones down in through here. And then once I've got as many as I feel is necessary, now I'm going to start picking up yellow and white. So you can wash your brush or not, whatever you want to do is totally fine. And this is going to be the little bright highlights on top of them. And I'm just going to kind of really dab it, especially up at the top, just to get these bright pops of highlights. And I'm just looking for some highlights. I'm not looking to make this into anything fancy, just giving the impression that there's little pops of brightness on top of these little buds. Maybe get a couple of more speckled ones up at the top with a bit more white in it, and just making sure that I've got enough sunshine within my flowers. So once I've got this done, we have one more tiny little step, and it's going to be with this small brush. So once you've got all of these little sparkling buds on the top of your tree and any little leaves that you want to have emerge throughout your flowers, you can wash and dry this small brush. And these are good space fillers too. So if you had a spot where you're like, oh, I don't like the way that flower came out, just put a little leaf poking out from in between, and that'll fill the space. And then you can just wash and dry this small brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so we are on to the final step. This is the final step of every painting, which is to sign it. So I usually sign mine in the bottom left or the bottom right corner. I'm going to use my small brush. I'm going to be using black paint, and I'm going to sign it over here in the left bottom corner. I do my initials, but you could certainly use your first name or the date or a symbol or whatever you would like for your identifying mark to be is totally fine. And that is going to conclude this painting. I hope you enjoyed the process. I hope you painted yourself a very marvelous moth, and I look forward to painting and sipping with you again sometime.